win something. And then that's it. And so we're trying to finish up by 7 o'clock. So
let me just give a note. I can see some people are trying to join with note takers, and it's not accepted. I'm taking notes and I'm recording, and everyone will receive the recording after the video. Okay, so
thanks, Patricia. Appreciate it. All right, so let's go. Automated testing with a K-test manager. So we're going to talk about why do we automate tests. We've probably talked about 1 billion times every time we've talked about automated testing, but we're going to talk about it again. Then we're going to talk about types of automated tests. Maybe I'll bring this over here so I don't keep looking to the side. What do you reckon? But then, you know, I won't be able to see. Then we're going to do a demo of creating a test for server logic, a test for, actually I might do client logic next, and then database logic, and then running and configuring those tests in the K-test manager. So let's have a look. There's lots of other tools for automating tests in the OutSystems world. Leo's going to show us another one, but this is the one that I wrote that, you know, I kind of like. It suited my requirements. So why do we automate tests? You know, let's talk about it in reality, not in, you know, the fancy kind of the way you should do things world. Sometimes we do it because your boss just read about it and said, do that. Sometimes it's because, I hope everyone knows who Kent Beck and Martin Fowler and that are. If you don't, Google DDD is dead and go and watch the series of videos. It's really entertaining and really interesting. So Martin Fowler told you to, maybe that's why you do them. Maybe David Hannemai Hansen. So he's the guy that wrote Ruby on Rails. And then he kind of changed his mind a bit. And that's what that DDD is dead thing's all about. So check it out. But nowadays, the main reason we do it is for continuous delivery. We can't really do continuous delivery without automating tests. Continuous delivery, we want to be releasing small iterations really quickly. So we need to have an automated test to make sure we haven't broken things, because manual testing we just won't keep up. That's a real reason. The other reasons are real reasons too, let's face it. Types of automated tests, well, there's server-side tests. They're the kind of easiest to do, really, in OutSystems. Then there's the client-side tests, testing client-side code. Then there's integration tests, like calling REST APIs or database logic. Now, the way I'm going to propose doing that is use exceptions to roll back the database transaction. The thing you have to worry about with that, because you have to worry about stuff all the time, right? The thing that you have to worry about is that if your logic has any side effects, like it kicks off a process or makes some service action call, then the rollback won't actually roll back those changes. So, you know, look out for that. And another option then is to actually set up and tear down test data. And you might do both. Generally, you will set up test data, that sort of thing. And then UI testing. So at the moment, this test manager doesn't handle UI testing. So, you know, you use something like Playwright or Selenium or whatever. But, you know, give me another 6 months and keep an eye on it. And it might be a different answer then. Right, so this is kind of a pretty common anatomy of a test, but this is what it is in the K-test manager. So it has you can configure a test suite, and that will run multiple test scripts. And the test suite is where you can configure tests to be scheduled, or you can have results emailed on completion. So you can set up a whole lot of test scripts and run them, and you know, every Monday night or every night or whatever. Now, test script is it calls a URL in an application you've built to run test cases. And a test case is a single scenario test on a target action. And you might have lots of different test cases on one action. Like if you look at this example here, we've got this sample multiply action that's got 3 different test cases in it. And then each test case within it has assertions. So that's the things that it's checking. So this sample multiply, it just returns a single number. So there's only one thing to run an assertion on, you know, is the result equal to what you expect. But in a real world test, often you've got, you know, tens of attributes that you want to test as the result of a test. Sometimes there's only just one, but often not. Okay. So now that's how you can configure a test script. What we do is we select whether it's a server or a client script. We give it the base URL of our environment. Example, that one, that's my personal environment. And then the relative URL. Now the system will actually auto-populate the base URL for you. But you need to put in the relative URL of the REST API that you'll configure, and we'll show that in a minute. Then you choose the authentication scheme. You know, I recommend using Bearer Authentication. It's easy to do and gives you a little bit more security. You can also set REST APIs so that they're internal only and have no authentication, but you won't be able to get there from outside the subscription. So that's another option. And you've got auto delete options. By default, it will delete results after 90 days, although you can select to keep individual results if you so desire. Now, client test scripts require a little bit more, because what it does, it actually runs a UI test in the background and hits a page and tells it to run client tests, because they need to run in a browser. So we need to tell it, you know, the screen height. There's a few options there for some CSS that needs to be available so it can detect when it's finished, and also some options there for actually logging in. So you can make your client test authenticated, and the system will go through the login page, and as long as your application will redirect properly back to the page that you deep link to, then it'll actually run it. So and it'll encrypt the password that you put in there as well. And you've got auto delete as well. Note that the encryption key that's used for encrypting passwords is configurable. So I recommend, if you do install this, just update the encryption key to something that's your own. So that's a little bit more secure. Of course, if you change the encryption key, you'll have to put the passwords in again, because when it tries to decrypt the password, it'll be the wrong value. So just look out for that gotcha. All right, configuring test suite. This is how you configure the schedule for it to run. You don't have to configure a schedule, and you can tell it to notify you on complete or on fail and give it the email addresses. So let's go and build a server test. So what do we need to do? I've got an application here. This is a test application that I'm using for this. And what we're going to do is, if it ever wakes up, here it is. What we're going to, we need to log in again. All right, great. We've got some premium calculation logic. We're going to unit test that logic. And because there's so much to do in this unit test, I'll just kind of get it started and show you how to get it going, and then I'll show you one I prepared earlier. So this is how you write a server test in the K-test framework. You actually use a screen template. So if we click on test, we select server action test, create a screen. But you know, you'll be saying, hey Stu, but we don't need a screen for our server action tests. No, we don't. This is using a cunning ploy to create a whole bunch of server actions for us. And then once we've created that, it gives you a bit of an idea of what to do. You can just delete that screen. You don't need that screen. And what we need to do here is create a REST API. So let's just suppose REST API. You can see I've already created from. And we add a method to say, you know, run tests. If I can spell. Now that needs to pass in a script run ID. Now there's a little test script request that we get from the K-test CS, the core services for K-test. So that's exposed this structure that you can use for your REST API. So let's just look, I'll just copy that one. And needs to be a post. And I'm going to say, let's, what am I doing here? I'm going to use custom authentication. So what we'll do is we'll select bearer token when we configure it, and that'll send through a bearer token. Now on authentication, we get the authorization request header. So we'll grab that. And that just comes from the HTTP request handler. I know I'm going to have to hurry up, aren't I? And then we just call this this service action from the K-test module that will authenticate the bearer token. So we just pass in the header value, and that will just verify that's a valid bearer token, and then we're good. So they're generated every time for every test. So they're not reused. Okay. And then let's just go into the one I prepared earlier. Then we just call a service action we've created, and this will just go and run our test. So let's have a look at the test template. So this is a pattern to use. Here's our action that we want to test, this sample action. What the framework will do for you is it'll set up this structure of this test for you. So you start the test case and you give it a name. You need to update the target action and say what we're going to test. So we're going to test the calculate premium. And so we'll get rid of that. And where's our premium calculation? So we've refactored this so we can make it testable. So we get inputs, and then we have this action that doesn't do any database logic, just actually does the calculation. So that's the one that we're going to test. Because here's the original version where you get all the data you need, you do your premium calculation, then you store it. But that'll work if you're doing a database test and then you have to roll back the transaction. But normally what you want to do is just test your logic. So you need to refactor it out into separate actions. Right, so then then we call that action, we do some assertions, and then we go end the test case run. This could throw an exception, so we need to catch an exception and then tell the test manager that, hey, there was an exception thrown. So that'll just close off the test case and say, hey, it was an error. So now once we've done this template, well, hang on, let's go back into a real test here. So this is the calculate premium template. Now, what we're doing is passing in the same values into our template that we pass into our action. And then we also pass in the same structure that that action returns as the expected results. What we do is we call that action with our input, and then we create assertions for all of the result attributes of that action, and then we say, well, it's a currency, so we're saying the currency should be equal the value that it returned and the expected value, if I'm making sense there. So now the reason why we're using this template approach, where we're passing in the inputs and passing the expected outputs, is once we've built that, and we also pass in the specific test name for the scenario that we're testing, then what we can do is we can rapidly write lots of different tests for lots of different scenarios. So this scenario is the 0 rate scenario. So the expected result is all 0 rates. And this is when we've got all different rates for our premium calculation. And then this is the expected results. Now, normally you'd have probably about 20 of these different scenarios. All right. So that's building a server test. Building a client test, there's a little bit more to it because we actually still need the screen, but we still just use a screen template. And now what this does is it'll show us the results. We have to go and say, hey, what are we testing? So we're testing the home insurance client actions. And we have this parameter by convention called run, which is a Boolean. So if we navigate to this page and that's true, then what we'll do is we'll actually run the tests. Otherwise, if you click on this button, this is just going to call run tests on click, and that'll run the test as well, which now this is a test script that's actually that's being created by the template for us. So then we need to go and modify that. Something I always forget to do, and you'll forget it too, is you need to update this module name here. Otherwise, your test is going to be called default module. And you can put in the description too if you want. Now, what this will do, let's go to actually, why don't we give it a different name? No, stuff it, don't worry. I haven't published that yet, so it doesn't exist. But this is the one I created earlier. So that's going to go and run tests against client actions and then tell us results. So I've put in some areas there for us. Now let's go and have a look at those actual tests. Right, so we've got 3 tests there. Oh no, so that's the demo script. So let's have a look at the actual script that we just run. So we're testing this C format currency action. Let's go into our template. So this is a little helper to, you know, instead of using format currency everywhere, and if you decide to change it from dollar to pound or, you know, 2 decimal places to 4, you know, this is just a little helper function that we can just put in one spot. And then zeros are going to be formatted like that. So, you know, I think it's handy. And all this needs to do is, because it just returns one value, is just confirm that the formatted value equals what we expect. And then in our test, we've got all these different scenarios where we pass in 0, 1 cent, round it to half a cent. We expect it to be 1, turns out to be 0. And I think it just truncates, I don't think it rounds. So, and you can just, to create another one, you can just easily just copy that and go, oh, let's say it's millions, and what would that be? I don't know. And really, we want that to be formatted with, come on, please, with commas, didn't we? So that's what it should do. There we go. We've just added another test. Probably should have just said, I don't know which test that was, but that's how quick it is to do. All right. Now, in the interest of time, let's just go and have a look at the database test. Where is that? Let's go back to our tests. Create quote. Right. So what we're doing here is testing the create quote function. But this is a, we're going to actually create records in the database, but we don't want them to stick around after our test. So we've got some setup code here. So this is going to create a customer for us, put some random values in, and it's actually going to call our applications action to create a customer. Not very complicated. So then it's got a customer it can use, and then it's going to create a quote with the quote, the options, and the home that it's quoting for, which is passed in as input parameters. And then it's going to test the expected results. Now, this little pattern here is, we've got 3 different structures that we want to run assertions for. Sometimes you might even have 2 records of the same type of structure. So what you can do is factor all the asserts into another server action, and you pass the case run ID in so it can just store the results of that, and then you can add assertions for all of the records that you're wanting to check. Right, so that'll check the results. Now, instead of just going, okay, close the test case, what we do here is we create an exception called a test pass exception, and we catch that specifically. Any other exception will be caught here and say, hey, test failed, exception was thrown, but this one will get caught, and then we can just go, hey, let's just end the test case, it's all successful. And notice on here, we say log error no, it's not a log error, like this is not an error, this is how we want it to work, but we have bought a transaction. Now, you might say, hang on for a sec, Stu, but you've called all of these, you've stored all of this data for the unit test, why doesn't that actually get rolled back? It's because you're calling a service action, and there's a transaction within each service action, and that doesn't get rolled back. So when you're writing your code and you've got multiple service actions being called, and you're not handling if one of them fails, Yeah, remember there's transactions going on. But that's how it actually keeps the test result data, but dispenses with any of the test data that we've created. So let's just have a quick look before I hand over to Leo at the K-Test Manager. So here it is. Here's our home insurance tests. So now let's see. This is the client test, and so we can run that from the server. So that's actually going to go on the server, create a instance of a browser and actually run the tests in there. So exciting. So that's the client-side test that's running. Let's go and run the server tests. Showing us the test cases here. We can expand that and to see what different test cases there were for each of those actions. And we can see the results, and we can say, hey, look, let's just have a look at the errors only, or we can have a look at the whole lot, or I'm just interested in that one or that one. The test only is really useful just so you can tick through, okay, what went wrong there? Was it my test data that I stuffed up, or is the actual action a problem? Okay, so, right. So in summary, automated testing, while it's slow at first to get going, you have to do it for continuous delivery. There's lots of options for automated testing on OutSystems. Even though it's not really built into the platform, it runs code, right? So automated test the code. So the test manager supports server, client, and database tests. There's screen templates to accelerate creating new tests. There are tons of assertions available to accelerate the verifying of results. You can run the tests manually or schedule them, and results are automatically deleted by default, but you can keep them if you want to. Thanks, everyone. I think we're doing Q&A at the end, so I might just hand over to the awesome expert Leonardo. Over to you, Leo.
Thank you, Stuart. Great presentation. I'm going to take over the sharing of my screen. All right, so I'm going to talk about yet another testing framework. As Stuart mentioned, there's lots of them in OutSystems. This is one I've created about 3 years ago, and I'm actively working to improve on it. And I created this mainly focusing on test isolation. I wanted tests to run isolated from database or from actions that might return things that could change over time. For example, if you think of an action that calculates, for example, a document number, a quote number, that will increase over time depending on how many records have been created on the database. So I wanted the test to be isolated from that and to always pass. If the code is right, the test should pass no matter what's on the database. All right. Many people ask, how do I get started, or how do I get familiar with this tool, this framework? It's very simple. You just install the Forge component. I actually, on purpose, haven't written any documentation because I want to, at least my vision, you should learn the component without reading documentation. There's a few documentation that we'll see. I wouldn't call it documentation, but we're going to get there. And then there's this new template that shows up when you create a new application. Now you have a test suite with the logo of the testing framework. And you should use that test suite. That creates a sample test suite. And it has a bunch of test cases for you, meant as a first exercise or learning tutorial for the framework. So that's the documentation that I was talking about. So just name it like my first test suite, or you can choose another different name, and publish it, and you should have your first tests already running. And the idea is that you can read those tests, understand how they're working, learn from it, and then if you want, copy and paste and adapt to your own test cases, or even create ones from scratch. So these are the test cases that are created by default. Just like Stuart's tool, these are REST services. So each REST service is a test case, and you can give it any name, really. And then inside of them, you will find code such as this one. And in here, you can see the documentation I was talking about. This is the introduction, which will explain. If you look at in here, the first test case is the introduction, which is meant for you to read first. Hopefully, you will read all of this, and then once you read this, get familiar with this code, what it's doing, then jump to the next one. And that's really all you need. I'm gonna show those steps just so we can see, executing those steps. And then where do you see those tests? Where do you run those tests and see if they are passing or failing? There's an application called Test Console, or rather a module called Test Console, that helps you view lists and execute tests. So if you publish that very first module, the sample module, you will get these two test suites. If we go back, we can see that there are two test suites. This one has 5 test cases. This one looks like there is 2, but this is a data-driven test. We're going to talk about that later. We can see that the first test suite has 5 test cases. All of them are passing. The second one has 9 test cases. Now, how do I know that they are passing? Because you can see they are green. So the idea also is that if you see something green, then it's good. If you see something red, then it's bad. You have to look into it. Okay? Now, about data-driven tests, these are a class of tests that they actually run the same code, but with different input parameters. Stuart mentioned that, like the multiplication, it's the same code to multiply the 2 numbers, or the formatting of the currency, the same thing, but you want to exercise that with multiple input parameters. And in this case, you can define the input parameters in an Excel file. So you could use a different file, but really everyone uses Excel file to standardize the input parameters and the expected value of running that code. You could have many input parameters or many output parameters as columns in here. Typically a single column with the name of the test. And then the framework reads this file and creates one test case for each row. Okay. So you can see that each row is mapped to different test case. That's how, even though we only have, it looks like there are only 2 test cases, but really this test case receives an input parameter and then is exercised with multiple combinations. Let's do a demo then. So I told you that it's easy to get started with testing framework. So this is the how it would look like in Service Studio. I've just installed the Forge component. If you open Test Console, which, by the way, it's the entry module. So if you click Open in Browser, here it will open that Test Console on the browser. If you open Test Console, before creating your first unit test suite, you'll get the same steps over here. So even the tool recognizes that you are starting and tries to help you. And this just reinforces my view that you shouldn't need any documentation to use this, because the tool tries to guide you in the correct path. All right, so let's follow this. I'll create a new application from scratch, choose this template, and give it my first test suite as the name. You could have called it a different name. And this is what you get. So the idea is that, okay, now I understand I have to read this to get familiar with this test case. I can see that there's a begin test case over here. It explains what it is doing over here. And then there's an assertion. And then it tells you, okay, now that you understood this, proceed to the next test case. So each test case is meant to teach you different aspects of the framework. Even the data-driven tries to teach you how to read the Excel file, how to create test cases based on the Excel file, and how to write the code that each test case should execute. But okay, so I can publish this without making any changes, and we'll see that the tests will show up in here. If we wait long enough, they will show up automatically, but we have this button to scan, so we don't need to wait, I think maybe every 15 minutes or every hour. By default, it scans to see if there are new tests. Okay, now it's published. We can click this button. And it finds those two test suites and starts executing them. So once they are found, they are executed straight away. And we can see in here, we're lucky that everything is green. So green is good. Everything is passing. We can execute test cases individually, or we can execute the whole test suite, or we can execute all test suites. And we can see inside of each test suite, inside of each test case, the results. So there's an insertion with this message. We can also see the history. So this will be executed many times. Some of them might fail, some of them might pass. And we have the history. So I've executed this twice. That's why I have 2 rows over here. All right, now I want to create a test suite from scratch. Okay, it's going to be a test suite very similar to one that is in the tutorial. For that, I should probably tell you about this save product. So this is an action that creates a product on the database and populates the, which I guess is very typical, populates the created date time and updated date time based on the user ID and the get and the current date time. It also checks for the role of the user. Okay, so it only executes logic if the user is a product manager. Okay, so how do I test that action? Save products. Sorry, let me call this. Okay, products. So that's the name of my test suite, and this is the name of my test case. Again, you don't need to follow any convention with regards to the name. So I'm gonna copy a few things from here because this is really similar to what we'll be doing. And this is things that you will learn if you go through that tutorial. But each test case has to start with this begin test case. And you can see in here that it actually forces you to write documentation for each test case. The rest are optional. The work item and authors are really optional, but documentation is required. Okay. And then what we'll do, well, our goal is to invoke tests, this save product. But first, there's some logic over here that I'll just copy, populating the product name. Actually, I'll copy everything. I'll copy this and I'll make assertions which are from the tool. I also have to copy this variable. All right, that should be good. And then make assertions. I'm gonna make just 2 assertions: created by and created date time. I'm not gonna bother with modified, just in the interest of time. So all of these actions I forgot to mention are from a single module that you have to reference, called testing framework. So it has this begin test case, and it has lots of assertions as well. So I'm gonna assert that the date time from, I'm saving the product, it creates on the database, populating those fields. And then I fetch the product that was created. My assertion should be that the result I get from database, the created date time, should be the same as the current date time. Okay. Documentation in this case is optional. I recommend you to do it, but okay. And then to assert user ID, we could use assert integer, or we could use assert identifier. They are basically the same. I'm going to use assert integer. So the value is created by, should be get user ID. Okay, and that's it. That's our test. So after I publish this, we should have a new test suite, and it should start executing automatically. Here it is. Okay, test suite is failing. Why is that? So this is documentation of the test suite. And in here we see the exception. So an exception was raised by that action. Not enough privileges. Okay. So there was an exception, no, not the product manager. This exception is being raised by this code. Okay. So obviously, I have no user in the context of this test case. So that code fails, as it should fail. So to address that, there is this action over here. I guess I can use this. So yes, this action over here before calling the save product. This will create a user with random name, and I can select which roles that user should have. So this will create a user just for this test, and it will grant it that role. So now that should be enough to bypass that business logic. Let's execute this again. Okay, now it's passing. So there's 2 assertions. I didn't document them, so it only says assertion passed. But if I would have written something here in documentation, that would show up in there. Now I want to show, we still have a few minutes. I want to show how to debug this. So debugging this is as easy as starting the debugger and then executing the tests. There's 2 ways to execute the test. I could open this REST in a browser or in Postman, and it would execute this code. Or I could just execute it in here. I forgot to put a breakpoint. I will get to that, Mike. So we can see that the test is executing by the tool, but I can also inspect it on the debugger. So I can actually show you what's the result of this setup in the debugger. You can see it's just creates random things. And yes, Mike has already caught the issue that, well, the user table now accumulates junk. Maybe I'll get to that. So it's going to execute the action and then execute the query. And we can see the created by was populated correctly. And now we go to the assertions, and then our test stopped. Why did it stop? Because it failed. And why did it fail? Because I spent some time on purpose trying to debug so that the current date time when saving the record is now different than the current date time of the assertion. So there's a few seconds of difference between them. So this happens during debugging. It could also happen very infrequently, I admit, but it could also happen during execution of the test, just if the server was slow at the time, or if by luck, or by lack of luck, the save product, there's a few milliseconds of difference, and it could be that, that's enough to switch the clock to the next second. So you would get a different date time on those two places. Now, to address that, there's a bunch of tools called mocks, and this brings me to the test isolation. I want to isolate this test from this effect of, the date time changes during the progression of the unit test. And there is one called mock current date time. This is all taught during the tutorials. So in the mock current date time, I can write a value over here. What's today's date? We can even write any date over here. Let's publish this. And the idea of this is that after I mocked the current date time, then it will always, the current date time function will always output the same value. So now if we do the same thing, start the debugger and execute the test. Actually, I'm not sure. Okay, it stopped. Great. If I do the same thing, I'm going to be a bit quicker now. But the point is, I want to spend a few seconds between this and this. Okay. And now we can see that the assertion failed again. Right. Murphy's Law. The way you should use this mock current date time is when you're building the assertion. You shouldn't use current date time again. You should use the mocked value. Technical reasons I don't have time to talk about today. And that will pass even if you wait, hours between this save product and the assertion. The values will always match. Okay. And this is just, I guess, just the beginning. There's lots of different tools to mock things. So for example, that issue I mentioned about the document number, depending on what's on the database, the next quote might be quote 1234 or might be quote 900. So that logic that calculates the next number, there's ways to isolate the test and make sure it runs regardless of the value on the database. We're already almost reaching the finish the end time. So I just want to raise a few advantages of this and address, for example, Mike's concern. So one thing that you've already seen is that tests are discovered automatically. So when you create a new test published in Service Studio, it's ready to execute. Data-driven tests, you can use Excel files to define tests and upload new versions of the Excel file, and the test is updated with the new Excel file. Database transaction is rolled back automatically at the end of the test. So that setup user that was creating a user, the user will cease to exist at the end of the test. It's going to be rolled back automatically. There's support to invoke non-public actions. So you can define tests for actions that you don't want to expose publicly, but still define those tests in a separate module. So keep the architecture clean. Mocks, we've seen just one example, but there's more. And if you follow the tutorial, you're going to learn more about mocks. They are executed every day, the tests. They are also republished, so you don't get outdated producers. There's support to run tests on APIs, so you can even integrate with CI/CD to run tests on every staging, for example. And very recently, I've added support for BDD framework. You have to install a second Forge component, but as long as you do that, then your BDD tests will also appear in Test Console. You can see the results. You can run them through Test Console and all of that. Things that are not yet in the tool, well, there's a few things more that I want to do with mocking. And there's, I would say, experimental support for client-side tests, but I'm still working on that. That's me. Thank you.
Thank you, Leo. Thanks, Stu, for the awesome presentations and demos as well. So for those of you, oh, sorry, any other questions? I think Pedro had a question, but he didn't have time to stay, so he'll probably reach out for that.
Yeah, Leo just answered his question just after he posted it, though, about CI/CD. And the K Test Manager doesn't have an API to run tests for CI/CD, but that's on the roadmap. So I don't know. I'll do it when I get some time. Hey, Leo, is there an ODC version of that yet?
No, not in the roadmap.
Right.
But I'll start talking with OutSystems and see what we can do about that.
Okay. Excellent.
All right. If there aren't any other questions, for those of you who can stay for a little bit, we'll have some Kahoot questions, and we've got prizes for the 3 top winners. Let me just share my screen. Just take over. Oops, did I present the wrong screen? Yes. right, so the game pin is 642962. And I'll share the link to Kahoot. So those of you who haven't played Kahoot before, simply click on the link I sent and enter the game pin, or just using your mobile phone, scan the QR code. Best for you to have two screens for this so you can see the question and you have your phone to press your answer.
Oh, that's the secret, is it? That explains a lot.
How have you been doing it, Stu?
I am. No, I'll shut up.
Not going to share your secret. Okay.
I was just going to make up something stupid. So yeah, probably just move on, Margaret.
We've got 5 players in. Let's wait for a bit more. Anyone else who'd like to join? Yep. No worries. No worries, Victor. Thanks for joining. Fun fact about Victor, he won twice in a row. For the last user group and the other one.
All right. Oh. Thanks for giving other people a go, Victor.
Yeah, probably. He's I'm just gonna win this. I'll probably give others a chance. Right. Should I press the button? Maybe. 5 more seconds. Here we go. We've got 9 questions. The faster you answer, the higher the points. Answer correctly, the higher the points. Okay, question number 1. What process needs automated testing to be in place? Continuous discovery, promotion to manager, continuous delivery, or team lunches?
Arguably, there's 2 right answers there.
Yep, I'm sure that's going to be tricky. Continuous delivery is the famous answer, but it's not the right answer. It's continuous discovery.
No, continuous delivery is the right answer.
Ooh.
Oops.
I'm sure that was.
I probably sent you the wrong thing. This is probably me.
Test.
Okay, everyone, I've just ruined the Kahoot.
All good. There are more questions, so yeah, more chances to win. Hopefully I did justice to the answers as well.
Sorry, everyone.
All good. Next one. To write a database logic test without changing data at the end. Ooh, tricky to call out the answers. Probably the green one again. Ooh. Right answer is throw an exception and roll back the transaction. Right, we've got Sunil at the top, followed by Mike, Anandi, Pete, and Sagar. Let's go to the next one. How does K-Test Manager handle old test results by default? Auto-deleted after 90 days, cook in an air fryer, compress into a zip file, or keeps them forever? So it's auto-deleted after 90 days. Sunil keeps the spot, followed by Anandi and Sagar also on third place. Next question. How does the K-Test Manager store passwords? Is it via Post-its? Salted and toasted. What were you thinking when were you having like lunch or dinner when you were writing?
No, that's the problem. I wasn't.
Oh, right. Mike takes the third spot, and Anandi has now 3 correct answers in a row. Well done. Fifth question, and probably the last for the K-Test framework, I think. What does the K-Test framework provide? Is it all of the above? Let's see. Yep, it's all of the above. Pete takes the third spot. Well done, everyone. Sixth question. Which of the following steps is not needed to get started with testing framework? Install the Forge component, create a test suite application, configure which modules have test cases, or read documentation. Ooh, this was a tricky one. Configure which modules have test cases. Sunil is still on the lead. Next question. When using testing framework, each test case begins with this icon. On initialize, preparation, on before request, or begin test case. The correct answer is begin test case.
Nice callback to traditional web, Leo.
We've got Sunil at the top still, followed by Anandi and Pete. And Jivitha is on the scoreboard as well. Eighth question. Is it possible to debug test cases from testing framework? The answer is true. Let's see the results. Sagar is back to 5th place. And last question. When creating a data-driven test, the inputs and expected outputs are typically found by correct answer is reading an Excel file by invoking getTest parameters. All right, let's see who are the top 3 winners On third place, we've got Pete. Well done, Pete. Second place, we've got Anandi. And on first place, we've got Sunil. Well done, Sunil. Thank you so much all for joining. And apologies for the first
Congratulations,
question.
Rhea.
That was my mistake, not yours, Stu. Thanks everyone for joining. And for those,
And
the
Nandi,
winners,
Kay, and Pete.
please.
I can't hear you, Margaret.
Can't hear me.
Can hear you now.
No. Okay, perfect. I've been talking. Well, again, congratulations to the winners if you haven't heard that. Please, I've flashed my email on screen, but I'll share it here. For the winners, please send me an email, and I'll let you know which information we'll need to send out the swag gifts. All right. Cool. Thanks everyone for staying. I know we've gone over time, and thank you very much to Leo for your time and for the knowledge that you've been sharing to these user groups. All right. Have a wonderful day, night, afternoon, everyone. See you again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. See you next time.
Thank you. Bye.